And interestingly, the increase in UFO activity was so tremendous at one point that the Mexican government pretty well straight up admitted that there was an issue in the air, in their airspace, and that they needed to start training pilots and radio tower controllers to be able to steer around the frequently flown route that these UFOs seems to utilize all the time in the region of Mexico City. And so, all that happened quite a bit of time ago, but, a lot of that information, unless you dig for it, doesn't really make it into the United States. So, since then, the Mexican government has admitted to having UFO encounters. They've released, actually, Air Force footage of filming UFOs and so on. And many other countries around the world, too, has started to release files. And there's very active groups all around the world that are led by very credible people, astronauts and military personnel and so on. They're all coming forward, including the Vatican, which is what is quite remarkable.
Yeah, something's weird going on there, Nassim, isn't there?
There is. I think we're approaching a very important time in our history where we may finally encounter civilization outside of our solar system.
Are you familiar with the work of Zecharia Sitchin, by any chance?
I am.
Okay. And, of course, for those who don't, and Zecharia was just our guest, and, he contends that 400,000 years ago, beings from another planet in our solar system called Nibiru, which is on a 3,600-year elliptical orbit, came to this planet in search of gold. They needed it for their atmosphere to protect it, and they genetically altered the creatures who were on this planet at the time that eventually became us. And he said he was able to decide of this by interpreting Sumerian, Iraqian templates at the time in text. What do you think of that theory?
I think Zecharia Sitchin got a lot of things right, and I think that in some way, in some areas, he made an interpretation that I don't necessarily agree with. One of the assertions he makes about this planet X that I believe actually was mistranslated from planet to comet. And you find in many other cultures around the world this concept of this killer comet that comes through the solar system once in a while. And so I think that when you actually look globally at all the different texts, you get a better picture and a more complete picture of what was going on there. So it's hard to tell. I mean, it depends on the interpretation of the texts. And for sure, many of these texts are written in very ancient languages that are very difficult to decode, and much of it has to do with the interpretation of them. Some of the texts I'm involved with right now that I'm very excited about are texts that come from ancient Indian cultures and Tamil cultures that come from, the Vedic tradition and so on, that talk about extraterrestrials and flying machines and so on.
Absolutely. I mean, ancient texts, artwork depict craft. How would they come up with this thousands of years ago?
Exactly. Even the concept of a flying machine should have been, and no pun intended, alien to a civilization thousands and thousands of years ago. I mean, some of the texts that I'm examining, and some of I have a little section on my videos about that, are thought to be dated 13,900 years old. You're talking civilizations that should have been in the dark ages of humanity evolution, people that should have been in caves, barely out of caves, and for them to describe flying machines and very complex steering capabilities of these machines and complex mechanism to make them fly is remarkable, and you really don't expect that from ancient texts.
We're going to come back with you, Nassim, in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And by the way, Webmaster Lex has posted on our Twitter feed at coasttocoastam.com pictures, a link of that UFO sun. Pretty amazing stuff, actually. Pretty amazing indeed. And, you can go over there and become one of our Twitter friends. So just get up there to coasttocoastam.com. We'll be back in a moment at Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with physicist Nassim Haramein. Nassim, last night, Coast to Coast guest Richard Hoagland, who's a regular contributor and our science advisor as well, heads up the enterprisemission.com.
Yes.
He claimed that spiral in Norway was the remnants of fuel from a captured Russian missile that he believes a shadow government, I'm going to use that a shadow government has incredible technology that could down a missile, capture it, that they wanted the world to really know what they were doing and the clout they did have. What are your thoughts on that thing?
Well, that's very interesting. I hadn't heard that one, but I don't know. It's a very difficult analysis. There's so much information out there, and when we look at the footage and the information that's available, it's a very difficult thing to decipher and to try to come to a positive, deterministic conclusion. However, I tend towards, from the analysis I've made, from the studies I've done, and from my understanding of certain levels of technologies that we have, that most likely the phenomenon that's seen over Norway is the result of a ground facility that has an array of antennas, best known as the HARP.
I know it well. The one in Alaska, and there's also one out that area, right?
That's right. There's one right near that area, ionic atmospheric heating facility. And, when you look at the footage, you look at the rotational dynamics of these spirals and the dynamics you see that seem to go to a ground effect. And, and then as well, there's all sorts of information that supports that. For instance, large surges in their power consumption during that time, during that night. Those plots are available and so on from that facility. And various effects that were observed from other HARP phenomena prior to this incident that were very similar effect. I think that it all starts to add up, and it's pretty conclusive. But there's no way that we can absolutely say what, in my case anyway, what has happened there. But I think it all points to that direction, and in one way, I'm a little, it's kind of a pinch in the heart if this is what is happened there, because I think that when the spiral finally dissipates and it opens in what people call a black hole, and, because I do black hole physics and I deal with all this, I got a lot of emails, black hole occurred over Norway and all this, and when I looked at it, and knowing what these devices do to the ionosphere, I believe that the dissipation that occurred when the black hole opened is actually a hole being poked in our ionosphere, and that's why the energy actually dissipated.
What about CERN? CERN's been active lately. Is it possible something's going wrong there? It's,
you mean the Hadron Collider?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been a very difficult project. It's been plagued with difficulties from the beginning. It's a very highly powerful accelerator. I'm actually surprised that not all of Europe dims when they turn that thing on, but